Good morning, everyone. So today you and I are going to talk about hardware and what type of computer I use and what I suggest that you should be looking for if you are going into programming. So let's get into it. Now, let's start off by simply stating that this is not me saying that one computer is better than the other. This is not me being a Linux fanboy or a Mac fanboy or a Windows fanboy, if there are any of those out there. I'm simply stating my experiences working in various types of programming with various tools and where I think one thing will make more sense than another thing. So, first and foremost, I will tell you that I started out using a Windows box, mostly because, hey, I am a gamer. I own my own, virtually I have my own desktop computer where I play most of my computer games, but I don't use my Windows machine for programming all that much. I mainly work on a MacBook Air, if you want to know. The absolute low end, at the time it was the most low end thing I could buy, smallest possible thing with basically as little power as I could possibly get. And now let me tell you why that is. So if you're starting out and you're getting yourself a computer and you want to do some professional level work, you will, I'm not saying you will, but there's a lot of people I see out there who kind of go, I don't know why. It's almost as the sort of people who dress as their favorite superstar of whatever they're interested in order because they're excited to get started with that thing that they're getting into. And the same thing goes for programmers. Like if you have a junior programmer buying a really fancy, expensive computer to do programming, then you're getting excited about the wrong thing, my friend, because most of the work that you're going to do doesn't require all that much. In fact, it's much more sane for you. Well, I'll touch on when you need to buy a more high-end device, but if you are doing, let's say, PHP programming or Node programming or something like that, there is absolutely no reason for you to buy a fancy computer. In fact, I would say buy one of the cheapest things that you can get. If you want to go a little bit fancier than that, buy something at the mid-level. Like, don't get crazy and buy like a MacBook Pro with the best specs that you can find. There's no reason for you, none at all. Because let's say that you do what I do. Let's say that you do front-end development, then it's hilarious how little power you actually need in order to do the things that you do. You could make an argument that if you're doing a little bit of let's say that you're really into retina screens and you need to use, some people will argue that you need to use a retina screen to be able to do UI development. You don't at all. It does help a little bit to get a full understanding of how things are going to look on a certain device, but for the most part you don't need that. So in terms of front-end work or stuff of that nature, think cheap. Trust me, just think cheap. And on the topic of operating systems, I highly recommend that you get a MacBook or possibly virtually any computer with a Linux install. Because the problem with Windows, there's nothing wrong with Windows, especially if you're doing C# development, or maybe you're doing C++ and you want to use Visual Studio or something of that nature, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with Windows. But you should know that the trend especially in front-end world, is to use a MacBook. And the reason why that's a trend is because the limitations, let's say that you want to do iOS development, you can absolutely kind of hack together a different solution in order to do that, but you do need, I find it very useful. Like, I do a fair bit of iOS development, so I want a MacBook. The second thing, apart from it being a very nice computer, it has a terminal that is virtually the same as what you find in Linux, whichever Ubuntu or whatever distribution you want to use. And that's very useful because I argue that as a developer, you kind of try to get used to working in the terminal because it will make you a better programmer. Well, not a better programmer, but it will make you more effective and make you feel more comfortable doing things that have... let's just say that there are a lot of things that make me a lot more effective if I can use the terminal. In fact, I know so little about the actual operating system on a MacBook that because I really only spend my time in the terminal. Now, when does it make sense to buy a more high-end device? This is interesting. So if you are using a full-fledged IDE, something like Eclipse, for example, and you do a lot of, let's say that you have a Java microservices structure and you need to have several servers running at the same time through your IDE, then it makes sense. My little MacBook can't really keep up with having one or two. Well, one is possible, but say that I had two or three instances of a web server running in Eclipse or IntelliJ. It's just too heavy for it to kind of manage that. That's when you want to go bigger, and especially like if you want to go even fancier than just a MacBook Pro, mid-level or high-end device like that. That's only really going to happen if you do games development or graphics rendering stuff. If you work in Blender or any of these 3D graphics software programs, basically, that's when you want to go really, really expensive, and that's a highly specialized use case. But for the most part, if you do IDE development work and you do compiled language type of work where you need a lot of CPU power in order to compile your stuff, I would argue that a MacBook Pro or something of that nature is going to do just fine. You don't have to go more crazy than that. And trust me, that's still going to be pretty expensive for you. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. Go cheap unless you need the extra juice. That's the way that I think about it. And I've been working with this MacBook Air I have for more than a few years now. It's never really let me down until recently when I started doing Scala development, where I have 3 different servers that need to be running in parallel. But my company, for the most part, your company is going to provide you with a device that can actually run the stuff that you need. For my own development purposes, it's never let me down. So that's basically my tip. I encourage you to have a look at Apple's products. They are very, very popular in the software development industry. Linux is also a good choice, but just to get that terminal familiarity, very useful. Windows, of course, if you're doing something that's Windows specific. Otherwise, stick to these two. And unless you're doing something very heavy like graphics, stuff of that nature that requires a lot of power, stick with a very, very cheap computer, at least to start off with, and then transition into something more expensive if you need it. And as I said, the only time you really need to go think about high-end devices, unless you're doing graphics, is when you need to work in a heavy IDE of some sort where you have multiple servers running at the same time. For the most part, a cheaper device is going to be a better bet for you. So save your money, and if you're a gamer like me, invest that into a nicer desktop computer that you can use to play your computer games. Have a great day.